book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7, verse 31, NLT. Those who use the things of this world should not become attached to them, for this world, as we know it, will soon pass away. This verse is part of Paul's teaching on how the elect of Israel should live in light of the shortness of time and the temporary nature of this world. In context, Paul is encouraging believers to hold loosely to worldly things, possessions, relationships, and pleasures, because the fashion of this world and its present form, its system or way of life is passing away. Engage with the world and its necessities. For example, work, marriage, commerce. But do not become overly attached or let it exploit you, and don't let it control you. This present world order is temporary. Eternal things like the kingdom of heaven or the next government and rulership matter more. The world turned upside down, or a brief description of the ridiculous fashions of these distracted times, by T.J. A Well-Willer to King, Parliament and Kingdom, London. Printed for John Smith, 1646. From the image of the world is turned upside down, 1646. During the English Civil War era, the image visually conveys a sense of inversion, disorder, chaos. Ordinary scenes are turned upside down, roles reversed, norms are disrupted, figures doing things backwards or in absurd ways. For example, a person putting on clothing recklessly or wearing mismatched garments, animals behaving like humans or humans like animals, dogs chasing cats, etc. The cart is set ahead of the horse, reversing the natural order of travel. The image of someone who has got dressed in the dark, perhaps clothes awry, hints of foolishness and chaos. In the picture, the absurdity is meant to provoke recognition that social order, tradition, good laws, habits, which people used to rely on, are being reversed or uprooted. The phrase, "the world turned upside down," captures a moment when the social order has been overturned. Wikipedia. The world turned upside down. The World Turned Upside Down is an English ballad. It was first published on a broadside in the middle of the 1640s as a protest against the policies of Parliament relating to the celebration of Christmas. Parliament believed the holiday should be a solemn occasion and outlawed traditional English Christmas celebrations, which were seen as too closely associated with Catholicism. There are several versions of the lyrics. It is sung to the tune of another ballad, when the king enjoys his own again. Its origin is in the scripture, but the other Jews, which believed not, moved with envy, took unto them certain lewd fellows of the baser sort, and gathered a company, and set all the city on an uproar, and assaulted the house of Jason, and sought to bring them out to the people. And when they found them not, they drew Jason and certain brethren unto the rulers of the city, crying, These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also, whom Jason hath received, and these all do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying that there is another king, one Jesus, the name in Greek. His name in his own language, Hebrew, is Yahushai. The book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 5 to 7. In the year 1646, England was in the middle of the English Civil War. King Charles I had surrendered. Parliament was gaining control, and radical religious and political ideas were circulating widely, all of which disrupted the traditional order. Authority once flowed from king to parliament to people. Now parliament acted on its own. Radical groups like the Levelers and Diggers called for equality, common land, expanded suffrage or voting rights, and an end to aristocracy. Power was no longer centered on the monarchy or nobility. That natural hierarchy was challenged. The imagery of animals acting like people, or women taking on traditionally male roles, reflected anxieties about gender and class roles being disrupted. There were fear that servants, women, the poor, and the unlearned might now speak in public, demand rights, or challenge their place in society. The song "The World Turned Upside Down," originally published in the year 1646 in England, later became symbolically associated with the American Revolutionary War, especially with the British surrender at Yorktown in the year 1781. First printed as a broadside ballad during the English Civil War, as a protest against Puritan suppression of Christmas and other traditional festivities. It mocked Parliament's interference with long-standing customs, warning that the natural order of society was collapsing. The world turned upside Down is a historical British song famously associated with the American Revolutionary War, particularly with the British surrender at Yorktown in the year 1781. But the story is more layered than that. Quick facts about the song. The title, The World Turned Upside Down. Origin, 17th century England. Likely written around 1640s. Type, a protest ballad. Purpose, a satirical response to Puritan reforms, particularly bans on traditional English celebrations like Christmas. Historical background. Number 1. Puritan suppression of Christmas from 1640s to 1650s. During the English Civil War and the rise of the Puritan power, Parliament banned the celebration of Christmas, viewing it as a pagan and immoral holiday. In response, this song was written to protest those bans, lamenting a world where old customs and natural orders were being upended by religious and political zealotry. If Christmas be forbidden, then the world is turned upside down. Number 2. American Revolution myth. Yorktown in the year 1781. According to legend, when General Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington at Yorktown, the British military band played "The World Turned Upside Down." There is no definitive primary source proving this, but the story has become a powerful symbol of Britain's defeat, as if the natural order has been reversed. Colonists defeating the empire. Historians debate the accuracy, but the legend is widely taught and dramatized. Cultural significance. The phrase, "the world turned upside down," has become a metaphor for radical social or political upheaval. The song itself is a symbol of resistance to authoritarian control, whether religious Puritans or imperial British Empire. It was used in the musical Hamilton during the Yorktown sequence, reinforcing the cultural memory of the phrase. Lyrics. Opening lines from the original ballad. Listen to me, and you shall hear. News hath not been this 1,000 year, since Herod, Caesar, and many more. You never heard the like before. Holy days are despised. New fashions are devised. Old Christmas is kicked out of town. Yet let's be content in the time's lament. You see the world turned upside down. You see, social hierarchies are constructed, not fixed. In both the medieval European nobility-based order and the later racial hierarchy emerged and fell, or are being challenged under different historical conditions. In medieval and early modern Europe, identity and status were primarily determined by birthright and bloodline, nobility versus commoners. Race as we know it today was not the main axis of power. People from different regions or skin tones could and did hold high positions, depending on wealth, faith, or royal favor. European art and writing from earlier periods includes people of color in various roles, not strictly as slaves or outsiders. The hierarchy was class-based, not race-based. Archaeology undermines the racial myth. The world is turned upside down. Dura Europus, an ancient Roman city in present-day Syria, buried in the 3rd century CE, which is rich archaeological evidence showing that early Christians and Jews in the region were people of color. The earliest Christian house church found there features wall paintings of dark-skinned people, challenging whitewashed depictions. Just like the old nobility-based hierarchy was overthrown, the racial hierarchy can be dismantled, especially when the historical myths upholding it are shown to be false. Universal Center for Renovation presents historical and biblical Israelites. This video is strictly for educational purposes and commentary. This video is of biblical and secular historical literature. So, enjoy. The book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, with the theme of the world being turned upside down. This verse is a powerful moment in the New Testament that captures how radical and disruptive the early Christian message was seen to be within the Roman Empire. The book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, is a powerful and often quoted verse from the New Testament that echoes the idea of radical social change, sometimes connected metaphorically to phrases like the world turned upside down. Here's the verse in several major translations, followed by context and interpretation. The book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, King James Version. These that have turned the world upside down are come hither also. English Standard Version. These men who have turned the world upside down have come here also. New International Version. These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here. The context. This takes place during Paul and Silas's missionary journey to Thessalonica. They have been preaching Jesus, Yahushua, as the Messiah, and some Jews and Gentiles began to follow them. But a mob, stirred up by some of the local religious leaders, accused them of disturbing the peace. They brought charges against Jason, a local believer who had hosted Paul and Silas. The meaning of turned the world upside down. The accusation reflects how disruptive the early Christian message was to existing social, religious, and political structures. Turning the world upside down is meant as a criticism, but from a Christian perspective, it becomes a badge of honor. The gospel changes everything. It's a reminder that Christianity challenged Roman political power, Jewish religious orthodoxy, social norms around class, gender, and slavery. The connection to the phrase, the world turned upside down. While the phrase from the book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, is not the origin of the British protest song we discussed earlier, the themes are similar. The book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, and the protest ballad. The gospel is disrupting the world. The ballad. Traditional life is disrupted by Puritan bands. The book of Acts. Radical spiritual transformation. The ballad. Radical social cultural transformation. The book of Acts. Seen as dangerous by authorities. The ballad. Seen as dangerous by authorities. The book of Acts. Upside down as a threat and hope. The ballad. Upside down as disorder and grief. The theological reflection. From a Christian perspective, the book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 6, shows that real transformation often looks like disruption. The kingdom of God, or the Hebrew name and pronunciation, the kingdom of Yahweh, reverses worldly values. The first shall be last. The meek shall inherit the earth. Power is perfected in weakness. This is the upside down kingdom, where what's normal to the world is reversed by grace, mercy, and truth. He stood frozen before the wall, the painted figures staring back at him as if across centuries. His pale eyes scanned the dark bronze faces, the curly and woolly hair rendered in ochre and black. He whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "These are the children of Israel. These are the people of Moses, of David, of Christ himself." He leaned closer, his breath shallow. His training, his books, his professors, all had spoken of purity, of Aryan form, of hierarchies, of race. Yet here, before him, the evidence was undeniable. The prophets, the patriarchs, the people chosen of God, were depicted with Negroid features. "How can it be?" he muttered, clutching his notes. "The very roots of our civilization, Afro-Semitic, bronze-skinned, hair coiled like the sons of Africa." A tremor passed through him. He thought of the churches in Berlin, of the paintings of a pale, flaxen-haired Christ, eyes blue as northern seas. He thought of sermons, of catechisms, of the pride his people placed in the image of a European Messiah. And now, this wall from Dara Europus shattered it all. If this is true, he hesitated. If Christ was truly as they were, if the Jews of old were of such form, then what of our divisions? What of our superiority? What of the chains placed upon millions across oceans, justified by their skin? His mind raced. Should he record this truth or bury it? Could he even speak of it without ridicule, without fury from his colleagues? He pressed his hand to the stone as though steadying himself against a world tilting out of balance. The faces on the wall seemed to gaze back with quiet defiance, whispering across time, "We are here. We were always here. You cannot erase us." The anthropologist closed his eyes, and in that silence, he felt the weight of a revelation too great for his century, too heavy for his own soul. A crucial historical factor in the development of European racial thinking. The centuries-long conflict with Muslim powers, especially the Moors, North African Muslims, and the Ottoman Turks, helped shape Europe's emerging ideas about religion, civilization, and ultimately race. This is the westward, or a map of the westward expansion of Islam. In the dark green, formerly Christian regions permanently conquered by Islam. In the medium green, Christian European regions temporarily conquered by Islam. In the lightest shade of green, Christian European regions raided by Islam. Areas with the cross swords, sites of 8 landmark battles and sieges. The Moorish expansion in the West from the years 711 to 1492. In the year 711 AD, Muslim forces from North Africa, mostly Berbers and Arabs, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and rapidly conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula. They established Al-Andalus, a Muslim-ruled territory, in what is now Spain and Portugal. This region becomes a center of science, philosophy, and culture, much more advanced in many ways than Christian Europe at the time. The Battle of Tours in the year 732 AD. Charles Martel, grandfather of Charlemagne, defeats the Muslim army near Tours in France. This is mythologized as the moment Europe stopped Islam from overtaking the West. The battle is often later reframed in European memory as the defense of Christian Europe against an Islamic, African, and Shemitic threat. The cultural impact of the Moors, though culturally sophisticated, become the dark other, politically, religiously, and racially opposite to emerging Christian Europe. The Ottoman expansion in the East from the 1300s to the year 1683. The Ottoman Empire rises in Anatolia or Turkey, and expands into the Balkans, Eastern Europe, and eventually threatens Vienna and Austria. The Siege of Vienna in the year 1683, a pivotal moment when the Ottomans reached the heart of Europe. Their failure becomes a symbolic last stand for Christian Europe. The Ottomans are Muslims, multilingual, multi-ethnic, including Arabs, Turks, Moors, Africans, and Southeast Europeans. The cultural impact? The Ottoman threat reinforces the image of the East, especially brown-skinned Muslim peoples, as alien, threatening, and inferior. From religious enemy to racial other. Initially, the conflict is framed religiously: Christian versus Muslim, civilized versus infidel, Latin Christendom or Western Europeans versus Saracen heathens. But over time, especially with the Reconquista in Spain, ending in the year 1492, the rise of racial slavery in the Atlantic world, the transatlantic slave trade, and the age of enlightenment, where reason is racialized, the image of Muslims, Africans, and Jews begin to shift from religious others to biological or racial others. This helps birth the idea of a white Christian Europe, opposed to non-white, non-Christian outsiders. The irony was Christian Europe contained its own dark skin tone people since the days of the Roman Empire, while Christian Europe built myths of itself as white, pure, and separate from darker skinned peoples. Its own history tells a very different story. From the days of the Roman Empire onward, Europe was multiracial and multi-ethnic, and dark and brown skinned people were always part of its population, including its Christian traditions.